What's behind me right now might not look like much, but starting this year, the South Quay Marine Terminal will be transformed into a major staging area for offshore wind operations in Rhode Island.
This land that we're standing on right here was part of the bay back in the early 80s. It was infilled, and the whole idea of filling this in at the time was to create a multimodal port where cargo would come in, connect to the rail system, and then be distributed throughout the Northeast and other parts of the country using the rail system. That project never took off, and so here we are today revitalizing this project. It's one of the potential port sites with the deepest channel along the Northeast. So we'll be able to bring in big barges with components to be assembled here and then shipped out to the sea. It's going to do a lot for the people of Rhode Island in the way of economic development and making us a state that's going to be able to really move off of carbon and fossil fuels with the expansion of offshore wind.
It may be hard to envision exactly what the staging site will look like, but the GM of Waterston Terminal Services says that it will look similar to the offshore wind operations in the Port of Providence that Waterston helps manage. And the two sites will also work in tandem.
Waterston Terminal Services is a service provider, so we can operate at the South Quay Marine Terminal in a very similar way to how we operate in Provport. And by having that coordination with the same company, we can utilize the two facilities almost as they're one. So we can set up customers in a way that if we don't have enough space to handle it there, we could potentially use South Quay as flex space. The vessels can go to both berths and do whatever they need to do.
Melissa Martin, the partnership director for Rhode Island Waterfront Events, the company that owns the South Quay property, could not yet provide job figures or salary figures at this point. However, Mayor De Silva said a long-term commitment can be made to the site based on continued industry growth.
The offshore wind industry, there are acres and acres of permitted, ocean lots where they can set up the offshore wind farms. That's going to take decades to build out. We know from speaking to different wind farm companies, offshore wind companies, that they don't have the port capacity along the East Coast. Even with this port, once it gets built out, it's still not going to be enough port capacity to handle the amount of work that's going to be happening over the next few decades. So I definitely believe that the jobs that will be created here will be long-term jobs.
As for when to expect the South Quay facility to be fully operational, Waterston said the target date is 2026, which will help address needs for more port space for offshore wind development. From the South Quay Marine Terminal in East Providence, for Roger Williams University, I'm Jimmy Sadowski.